How about this for a hot take about the Canadian real estate market? What if I told you there's more regions in Canada where home prices are increasing versus decreasing? So have I got your attention now, or are you already too busy down in the comments section rage typing about how I'm just a realtor trying to pump the Canadian real estate market up to sell another house to an unsuspecting buyer? Welcome back, everyone. My name is Matthew Pfeifer, real estate agent in Regina, and my trusted assistant Matilda, well, actually, she's on vacation this week, so we'll have to give you this month's Canadian real estate market update without her. If you're a returning viewer, you're going to notice we got a different order this month. We're not going west to east. If you want to jump directly to a specific city, well, the timeline, you should be able to do that, and also timestamps will be in the description below. You can also find a link to my calendar in the description below where you can book me in for a buyer's consultation. If you're buying a house in Regina, I would love to be your agent and navigate our red hot real estate market. But if you're somewhere else in Canada and you're looking for a fantastic agent, I can recommend a great one from my network of agents across the entire country. Link in the description below. Also, might as well hit that subscribe button while you're at it. And of course, this wouldn't be a Bald Prairie Real Estate video without another one of my terrible bad dad jokes. How do you track Will Smith in the winter? You follow the Fresh Prince. If you have a terrible joke I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get you up to speed on the Canadian real estate market. This truly has been the toughest spring market I've ever seen for home buyers in my entire career. We're seeing good houses getting 10 plus offers, selling for more than $50,000 over asking price. Ask me how I know. Just this past month, I had multiple buyers make offers $40,000, $50,000 over the asking price and got beat by offers $10,000, $20,000 higher than theirs. As a home buyer, the market has basically become, how bad do you want this house and how much are you willing to pay for it? I'm also seeing now more and more buyers making offers without any sort of inspection conditions, and some of them are even removing their financing conditions. If you're gonna make that type of offer, you better be very confident in the house or be willing to accept the potential problems it has and be very confident in your financing. If you want some context for just how busy the Regina real estate market is right now, there's only been twice where a June had more sales than we had this past June. There was 410 homes that sold in June of 2021 and 408 homes that sold in June of 2022. So 6 and 8 houses respectively. In both of those years, the inventory was double what it is right now. There is a little sliver of good news for home buyers, and that is, well, two things actually here. The first is the active inventory gap is continually getting slightly better. It's still really tough with the lack of inventory, but there was a time that inventory was down over 50%. Now we're down only 40%. And we are at the time of the year, seasonality wise, where typically Regina real estate market starts to slow down a little bit. People focus on summer holidays and vacations, etc. So we might see a little bit less competition for listings now. Talking with real estate agents in Saskatoon, they're telling me that their buyers are starting to get frustrated and exhausted with their market conditions. And I don't blame them. We're seeing more houses in Saskatoon that have offer dates fail to attract even a single offer on that offer date. And I'm seeing that as well in Regina. Now, I think that's less to do with buyer demand. There's definitely buyer frustration and exhaustion. That still exists. But it seems that houses are being priced higher than they should be, and the sellers are thinking, well, we can just slap on an offer date and buyers will come up to us and give us more than our asking price, and that's simply not happening. To get over asking price, generally, you're gonna have to list that property below the market value and hope it gets bid up over market value. But don't mistake this for a slow or even slowing market in Saskatoon. We saw the second most homes ever sold in June last month, and active inventory is still down 50%. It was down 60% a few months ago. I am very confident there would have been more sales in Saskatoon had that inventory been higher. And if you want an example of just how bonkers the Saskatoon real estate market is, there was a house that sold, and I'm going to call it a less than desirable neighborhood, for $70,000 more than the asking price. If you're going to go and pay more than asking price, don't do it in a bad neighborhood. Just please don't do that, guys. There is a little bit of good news for home buyers in Saskatoon. That is, we'll probably start to see some seasonality playing into the Saskatoon real estate market as people focus on their summer holidays through July and August. I still think it's going to be a really crazy busy summer though. Looking at the stats for Winnipeg this month, you can see month over month sales actually dropped, and that's relatively common as people start focusing on graduations and summer holidays at the end of the school year. It was a fairly substantial increase year over year though. Unfortunately for homebuyers in Winnipeg, new listings also saw the largest decline we've seen so far this year, and the sales to new listing ratio is the highest it's been since 2021. And if you've been out looking for homes in Winnipeg, you know that there's really not a lot out there right now, and it's been down 4% basically since April and hasn't improved at all this year. When you're looking at home prices in Winnipeg, they continue to be month after month up 8% year over year. At this pace, Winnipeg might actually end the year with the highest year-over-year increases in all of Canada. When I'm talking with agents in Winnipeg, they said that $250,000 to $500,000 price point, that is still ultra busy and competitive. A lot of houses selling $50,000 to $100,000 over asking price. And I know that's been a marketing strategy in Winnipeg for years now, but even agents there are being surprised by how much the overbidding has gone up recently. When you're looking at the plus $500,000 price point, that isn't quite as competitive, but it's still a relatively busy market. Compared to last year, the Halifax real estate market is quite a bit busier this year. It's still down versus the 5-year average, but that's mostly to do with how busy the Halifax real estate market was in 2019, 2020, and 2021. Yes, the Halifax real estate market was actually on fire well before COVID and the ultra low interest rates that came along with it. In fact, there were more home sales in June of 2019 than any subsequent June except for 20 and 21. And those months were only about 10 to 15% busier than 2019. The bad news for homebuyers in Halifax is that we saw a fairly substantial drop off in new listings. Now, this is typical May to June, but this year we saw a bigger drop off than we typically see. And in theory, homebuyers in Halifax have more choice than they've ever had with about 1,200 active listings. But when I'm talking with agents, they're telling me that there's an awful lot of, we'll call them low quality listings that continue to sit on the market, while the good listings are being snapped up quickly, leaving buyers feeling like there actually isn't that much choice for them right now. And once again, I gotta hate on average price. Unfortunately, in Halifax, they just don't use the benchmark price. And you can see it's up 14% year over year. And you think, wow, what a crazy busy market. But actually, that's more to do with the fact that last year, average price dropped $50,000 in June, and then subsequently jumped back up an additional $30,000 the previous month. And that's just the volatility of average price in a smaller market like Halifax, where a handful of sales high or low can really skew the average price. The big story in the Victoria real estate market this month has to be that home sales were above, yes, up above the 5-year average. That's the first time all year. And if you take a look at my sales chart here, you can see that this was kind of coming. We've seen that the gap versus the 5-year average has been declining basically all year long, and now we're up above the 5-year average. In fact, this was the busiest June by a mile since 2021. The other chart that I've been following here that I think is very interesting for the Victoria real estate market is new listings. Going into 2025, there was a lot of people expecting, with all of the ultra low mortgages that we're going to start renewing in 2025, there would be homeowners that would have to put their house up for sale because they couldn't afford those renewals. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know my feelings on that was more hype than reality. And looking at the chart here, you can see that the numbers of new listings, yes, are above the 5-year average, but that gap has basically declined every month all year. So instead of seeing a wave of new listings as these homeowners are forced to sell their homes, we've actually seen fewer people putting up their homes for sale as the year has gone on. There are two pieces of good news for home buyers this month, and that is the first, that active inventory continues to remain well above the 5-year average, meaning home buyers have more choice. And because they have more choice, they've got a little more leverage in negotiations, and we're seeing that reflected in home prices as well. If you've been following prices in Victoria, you've seen that the last 2 months we've had month over month price declines. Year over year, they're still up. Now, some of that is absolutely due to seasonality. Home prices in Victoria typically peak out in June or July, and then we see them soften for the back half of the year. But also, we've got more choice and buyers have more leverage, and that's part of what's driving prices down as well. Here's a fun fact about the Edmonton real estate market. Do you know which June had the most homes ever sold in a single month? If you answer 2025, congratulations, you win a prize. I'm actually kind of serious there. Comment below and maybe we can figure something out there. But yes, this past June was the most homes ever sold in a June in Edmonton's history. Part of that record-setting month of sales was because new listings also increased, making that record partially possible. The good news for homebuyers in Edmonton is that active inventory continues to trend back towards the 5-year average. The bad news for homebuyers in Edmonton is that 5-year average includes the 5 years with the lowest levels of inventory in Edmonton in something like 20 plus years. This next sentence here is something that I'm still struggling to wrap my brain around. Last month, we saw home prices in Edmonton up 8% year over year. And that was the smallest year over year increase we've had yet this year. A couple of years ago, if you had told me, hey, home prices in Edmonton are going to increase 8%, I would have said, wow, the Edmonton real estate market is absolutely red hot, blistering, record-setting pace. And now we're saying, that's one of the slowest price increases they've had all year long. Context sure makes things interesting. The reality is, though, the Edmonton real estate market is likely going to slow down, much like we have seen in Calgary. Some of that's going to be seasonality. We're already in that time of year where things start to slow down. And of course, you just can't have 10% year over year price increases month after month. You can continue to set home sales records month after month. Eventually, things will slow down. And I expect, although we're going to continue to probably see a slowdown in Edmonton, the real estate market there will likely still continue to be much busier than normal. The Ottawa real estate market is one of the outliers in Ontario right now because even though inventory is increasing, home prices have actually been increasing as well. One little quirk in the stats, the Ottawa Real Estate Board in their press release said home sales were up 3.8% versus the 5-year average. I'm using the same data they are. My calculation says they're up about 1%. Either way, sales are still up. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that the apartment condo market continues to be the slowest part of the Ottawa real estate market, with home sales down 20%. The inventory situation is a little bit of a mixed bag for home buyers in Ottawa because yes, new listings and active inventory are both up, but that gap versus the 5-year average continues to shrink. Looking at the composite benchmark price, there were some interesting stats here. For single family homes, that is up about 2%. For townhouses, it's up 9%. And for apartment style condos, it's down almost 1%. If you're a home buyer in Calgary, you basically have not had it this good since 2020. Home sales have slowed down, prices have started to soften, and inventory is increasing. And if you've been following the channel for a while, you know I've said that this was bound to happen. Simply put, that red hot market was unsustainable. But here's a crazy stat for you. If you compare the June we just had, which people are all saying was sluggish and slow, to that 2020 June, well, home sales are actually up 30%. So yes, much slower than it has been, way busier than it used to be. Of course, everyone has been talking about how much inventory has been piling up in the Calgary real estate market, and it has been. It's up 83% versus last year and 30-something% versus my 5-year average. But again, if you compare versus 2020, which by the way, was nowhere near the most active inventory Calgary's had, well, inventory was only up 4% this year. And if you compare versus 2019 or 2018, well, then active inventory today is actually down 6% and 22% respectively. And that's why I like having all of the data that I have to create these videos so I can look back at those longer term periods, give a better comparison as to what's going on or compared to, maybe more quote unquote normal years. If you're just looking year over year, well, then that can send you astray, making bad assumptions about the market potentially. But I'm also not going to be surprised if we continue to see the Calgary real estate market slow back down to those 2020, 2019, even 2018 numbers, because that was, although maybe slower in 2018 and 2019, more indicative of a normal market in Calgary. And eventually, Calgary is going to get back to normal. I really find the Montreal real estate market fascinating because it just beats to its own drum. And this is kind of true for all of Quebec. Right now, we've got active listings up in Montreal, and yet home prices are soaring. When I started keeping tabs on the Montreal real estate market back in 2019, first start looking back kind of through their historical data, I found their active listing count really interesting. Everybody's freaking out about the 32,000 active listings in Toronto, how it's the highest ever. But up until recently, that was just typical for the Montreal real estate market. And obviously, Toronto is a much bigger city than Montreal, but Montreal just always seemed to carry more active inventory. Then there's Quebec's unofficial moving day. And this whole story itself is absolutely fascinating. If you ever want me to do an entire video just on the Quebec moving day, let me know, because you can actually trace this all the way back to the 18th century French government, and it was brought over to Quebec from that government. And of course, back in the 1970s, they changed legislation, moving it from a May possession date to July 1st, where all leases would end. And that still can be felt in the Montreal real estate market to this day. Buyers, especially first-time home buyers, want to get those purchases done in March, April, May, so they can have possession date for July 1st and hit that unofficial moving day. When I was talking with real estate agents earlier in the month, they were saying at the pace homes are selling, we might actually see a year-over-year increase in home sales well, didn't quite get there, still down about 2.5%. And yes, it's still from record low levels, and it's down 22% versus the 5-year average, but a few months ago it was down well over 30%, so that gap is starting to shrink. The other interesting stat to kind of take note is that typically home sales drop from May to June 5 to 10%. This year, we saw no change at all. Could be just a blip on the radar, but something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. Looking at stats for just the city of Toronto itself here, active condo listings are double active single family home listings, and the increase in condo listings has been 4 times the overall increase in total Toronto inventory. And actually, Toronto condos currently make up 10% of all the active inventory in the entire Tri region. Usually that is below 5%. This stat that I think pretty much every news outlet reported on so far this month is that there are 32,000 homes for sale in Toronto right now, most ever. And that is a great headline, and it is true, but the Toronto Real Estate Board has also expanded greatly the number of cities that are encompassed within the Toronto Real Estate Board. So it is also a little bit misleading, but without a doubt, active inventory is way up. As a home buyer in Toronto, you are probably going to have the leverage in negotiation. Most houses now are selling under asking price. Remember only a few years ago, basically everything was selling over asking price? Well, complete opposite now. And if you put an offer forward the sellers don't like, well, just wait a couple of weeks. They're reading the same stats that you are. Home prices continue to decline week after week, month after month. They might be more receptive to that offer in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I think we're seeing some early signs of the Vancouver real estate market starting to turn a corner and recover back a little bit. Stick with me here. Let's go through some data. Taking a look at the sales chart here, you can see a clear pattern starting to develop, and that is that sales gap versus the 5-year average continues to decline. Yes, sales well below the 5-year average, but that gap is shrinking. And even if I take out the 2020 data, which of course really skews things because, there was this thing that happened in 2020, you can see that pattern still exists. Does that mean I think home prices are going to shoot through the roof in Vancouver? No, that's not what I'm saying. But let's look at some data here, because generally what happens with prices trails what happens with sales. Starting off with 2020 here, you can see a big uptick in home sales starting in June, but we don't really see prices really start accelerating until later in the year and early into the spring of the following year. And a similar story plays out when we look at 2022. Home sales fall off a cliff starting in June, but we don't see those big movements in price again until later in the year and early into the following next year. Long story short here, my gut feeling is that now with the election past us and at least some stability when it comes to economics and trade policy, and I get it, with Donald Trump in the office, nothing is predictable anymore, but there is at least some certainty that people can see. I think we're going to see a continued pattern here where sales probably still going to be below the average, but we'll probably see it continue to inch closer to that 5-year average as people feel more confident making those purchases.